In the bustling city of Lagos, where the sun blazed over the Atlantic Ocean and the air smelled faintly of salt, sweat, and roasted plantain, life moved at its own hurried rhythm. Yellow danfos screeched through traffic, their conductors hanging halfway out of the doors shouting, Ojalegba, Yaba, Surilir straight. The Okadas weaved dangerously between cars, and market women called out prices of tomatoes, onions, and pepper, their voices rising like music above the chaos. It was a city that never truly slept, loud, alive, relentless. And right at its heart, in the vibrant community of Yaba, lived Chaik and Adana, a couple everyone seemed to know. Their love story was one that made aunties sigh with admiration and uncles nod with approval during weddings. It was the kind of story that reminded people that, even in a world of heartbreak and hustle, true love could still bloom. Chaik, a tall, broad-shouldered man with calm eyes and a smile that could melt the hardest heart, worked as a software engineer at a fast-growing tech firm in Acadia. He was quiet but confident, the kind of man who spoke less but did more. His colleagues admired him not only for his intelligence, but for his humility, a rare trait in the high-stakes world of Lagos tech. Chaik moved with a purpose, his every step measured and sure, a stark contrast to the frenetic energy of the city around him. Adana, on the other hand, was a burst of sunshine in human form. Her dark, glowing skin always caught the light beautifully, and her laughter, loud, carefree, and contagious, could fill any room and lift any spirit. She taught at a primary school in Surilir, and her pupils absolutely adored her. She had a way of turning learning into magic, of making even mathematics feel like an exciting story waiting to be told. Her classroom was a haven of creativity and joy, a small island of wonder in a sea of urban sprawl. Their paths crossed one humid Saturday evening back in 2019, at a friend's birthday party in Lekki Phase 1. The music was loud, the air thick with perfume and the irresistible aroma of jollof smoke, and the DJ was spinning Burna Boy's Ye, a true Lagos anthem. Adana was on the dance floor, her hips swaying effortlessly to the beat, her infectious laughter echoing through the crowd. She moved with a freedom that was captivating. Chaik spotted her from across the room, and for a moment, time seemed to slow down. There was something about the way she moved, not just the grace in her dancing, but the pure, unadulterated joy in it. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing for an audience. She was simply herself, lost in the music, radiating happiness. His friend nudged him, a knowing grin on his face. Guy, you just look? Go talk to him now before another man reached there. Chaik smiled shyly. He wasn't the type to rush in, to use flashy lines or over-the-top gestures. But something about Adana pulled him in like a tide, a magnetic force he couldn't ignore. He walked over, his heart thudding in his chest like a talking drum. He waited for the song to end, took a deep breath, and said, "You dance like Lagos traffic, unpredictable, but beautiful." Adana burst into laughter, the kind of genuine, head-turning laugh that made you want to laugh along. "That's the strangest compliment I've ever received," she said, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Then I must be doing something right," Chaik replied, his own confidence growing in the warmth of her smile. They talked for hours that night, their conversation flowing as easily as the palm wine being passed around. They talked about music, about the challenges and rewards of teaching, about the future of technology in Nigeria. They debated the best suya spots, the fluffiest ajij bread, and the magic of late-night walks on the Third Mainland Bridge, when it wasn't too risky. They discovered a shared love for the same kind of music. Everyone said Chaik was the perfect gentleman. Even the skeptical aunties who usually found fault in every young man courting their daughters agreed. He had that rare Lagos blend of confidence and humility, mischief and respect. He called Adana Omalika, his beautiful one, and his messages were a constant part of her mornings. "Good morning, my sunshine," he would text before she even woke up. "May your smile light up the world like it lights up mine." Adana would blush every time, clutching her phone to her chest before getting ready for work. Her colleagues at the primary school in Surilir teased her endlessly. Adana, this your software engineer day code love letters for you oh." She would just laugh, her dimples deepening. "A beg, make una leave me Jer," she'd say, pretending not to be flattered. But everyone could see the glow on her face. On weekends, Chaik made sure to see her. Sometimes he'd pick her up in his silver Corolla and drive her to Mama Cass in Yaba. There, they'd share plates of jollof rice and grilled chicken while talking for hours about work, life, and dreams. Other weekends, they went window shopping in Balagan Market, where he'd buy her Ankara fabrics, bold, colorful prints that matched her energy. "This one go fit you, O Malika," he'd say, holding up a fabric with deep red and gold swirls. "Ah, Chaik, you want turn stylist?" she'd tease. He'd just smile, that slow, confident smile that always made her heart flutter. But what made everyone love Chaik wasn't just how he treated Adana. It was how he treated her family. Each time he visited the Amika's compound in Ajagunal, he brought small gifts, fruits, malt drinks, and sometimes a loaf of fresh Ajij bread. He always greeted everyone politely, even the nosy neighbors who came out to greet, but mostly to gist. He would kneel to greet Mama Ngozi, Adana's mother, every single time. "Good afternoon, Mama. How you day?" Mama Ngozi would beam with pride. "Ah, Chaik, you are a good boy. I can see you were well raised." Her husband, Papa Emeka, was a tougher nut to crack. A retired civil servant with a serious face and a slow, deliberate way of speaking, he didn't trust easily. He'd seen too many young men make promises they couldn't keep. But Chaik was patient. He never acted proud or defensive. He listened respectfully whenever Papa Emeka spoke about life, work, or the importance of integrity. Gradually, the older man began to soften. "This boy," Papa Emeka would say one evening, sipping his star beer, "he gets sense." You see, the Chaik that Adana and her family knew was a man transformed. Before her, his story was different. He was known across Lagos's social circles as a ladies' man, charming, confident, and dangerously smooth. From rooftop parties in Victoria Island to night gatherings in Lekki Phase 1, everyone knew Chairman Chaik, the man who never came to a party alone and never left without turning heads. His phone was always buzzing. There was Funmi, a sharp-tongued banker who loved to argue. Then there was Tokay, a model whose beauty drew attention everywhere she went. And Chioma, a university student from Festac who thought she could fix him. They had all been part of his wild bachelor life. He never lied to them, but he never gave them promises either. "Let's just enjoy the moment," he'd say with that disarming grin. And they always agreed, until they fell too deep. His friends, Emma and Tund, often teased him about it. "Chaik, you be bad guy, oh," Emma would say, raising his bottle of Gulder. "No woman fit tie you down." Chaik would just laugh, tapping bottles with them. "Love is stress, my guys. Nah enjoyment I day find." But deep down, even he knew something was missing. Then came Adana, the woman who didn't chase him, didn't flatter him, and didn't care about his reputation. When they met, her calm confidence disarmed him completely. She didn't fall for his usual charm. She challenged him, questioned him, and laughed at him when he tried to show off. For the first time in his life, someone saw beyond the surface, and he liked it. She made him want to be better. He stopped replying to Funmi's late-night texts. He blocked Tokay on WhatsApp after one too many flirty messages. He even started taking longer routes home just to avoid passing Chioma's estate in Festac. Adana didn't ask him to change. She simply made him want to. By 2021, when he knelt before her under the starlit sky at Tarkwa Bay, the ocean whispering around them, it wasn't the usual Chaik proposing. It was a man reborn. He had saved for months to buy the ring. A simple but beautiful silver band with a small diamond that sparkled just like her laughter. "Adana," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "you're the first woman who made me believe in forever. Marry me, and let's build a life together." Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Chaik. 1,000 times yes." His friends didn't believe it at first. "Chairman? Settle down." "Nalat," Tund exclaimed when he told them the news. But Chaik just smiled quietly. "I've played enough games," he said. "Now I'm ready to build something real." And for a time, it truly seemed that love had tamed even Lagos's smoothest lover. The wedding planning was a whirlwind of excitement. Adana's family and Chaik's family met, and the introduction ceremony was set. The air was filled with laughter, negotiations, and the sweet promise of a shared future. Adana was over the moon, picking out Asoabi colors and dreaming of their life together. Chaik was the doting fiancé, involved in every detail, from the caterer to the venue. He seemed to have left his old life completely behind. He changed his phone number, telling Adana it was to avoid distractions and focus on their future. But old habits, as they say, die hard. One evening, while Chike was in the shower, his old phone, the one he claimed he wasn't using anymore, buzzed. It was on the bedside table, hidden under a book. Curiosity got the better of Adana. She had never felt the need to check his phone before, but something pushed her. She unlocked it. The password was her birthday, and what she saw made her blood run cold. It was a message from a name she didn't recognize. "Babe, are you still coming tonight? Don't keep me waiting too long." Her hands shook as she scrolled up. There were dozens of messages, not just from this person, but from others too. The flirty banter, the late-night plans, the inside jokes, it was all there. It was the life he was supposedly done with. It was Chairman Chike, alive and well. The night before his wedding was supposed to be a whirlwind of joy. It should have been filled with laughter, friends cracking jokes, maybe one last late-night call with his fiancée, Adana, sharing their excitement. But for Chike, sitting alone in his small Yaba apartment, the air was cold and heavy. Outside, Lagos was alive. The familiar sounds of the city, the impatient car horns, the buzzing okadas, the street vendors shouting their wares, were all there. But inside, a deafening silence pressed in on him. On his table, a single white envelope from St. Nicholas Hospital felt like it weighed a ton. Inside was a piece of paper that had crushed his entire world. He'd unfolded and refolded it so many times the creases looked like old scars. The words were clinical, direct, and absolutely merciless. HIV test result, positive. He read it for what felt like the 100th time, desperately wishing the letters would just rearrange themselves, that it was all a terrible mistake, a mix-up in the lab. But the truth was stubborn. The doctor's voice echoed in his head, calm and professional. "Mr. Chike, your test came back positive. But please, don't panic. With treatment, you can live a long, normal life." But the only word that stuck, the only word he heard, was positive. It didn't sound like the start of a treatment plan. It sounded like the end of everything. His hands trembled as he dropped the paper. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His mind reeled, flashing through memories, broken pieces of his past. There was Funmi, the banker who loved late-night wine and whispered promises she never intended to keep. Then there was Tokei, the wild and fearless model who treated love like a game. And sweet Chioma, the university girl who thought she could fix his broken parts. And then, that one reckless night in Abuja. A tech conference, too many drinks, a terrible mistake he thought he had left far behind him. He buried his face in his hands, a sob catching in his throat. God, why now? Why me? And then, the most painful question of all, why her? He thought of Adana, her smile that could light up a room, her infectious laughter, her unwavering faith. She was pure light, a beacon of goodness in a city that could easily swallow you whole. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to be tied to his past. Tears, the first he'd shed in years, finally broke free. He'd done all the pre-wedding tests the church required, blood group, genotype, HIV, as if they were just items on a checklist. The possibility of this result hadn't even crossed his mind. He was so close to his future, but his past had reached out and grabbed him by the throat. He picked up the paper again, staring at his name. Chike Nwosu. It felt like the name of a stranger now. The name of someone careless, reckless, and broken. He had to tell her. He reached for his phone, his thumb hovering over her name. He could already hear her voice, soft and trusting. "My love, why are you calling so late?" What could he possibly say? "Adana, I have HIV." The words felt like fire in his throat, impossible to speak. He stood up and started pacing his small apartment, a caged animal. The clock on the wall ticked past 11 p.m. His wedding suit, a crisp white igbata embroidered with gold, hung on his wardrobe, a cruel reminder of the morning to come. He imagined Adana's wedding gown, laid out in her parents' home, her mother fussing over every single detail. Tomorrow was meant to be the happiest day of their lives. Overwhelmed, Chike sank into a chair. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message from Adana. He opened it. "Babe, can you believe tomorrow is finally here? I can't sleep. I'm just too happy. I love you." He stared at the screen, his vision blurring with fresh tears. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He typed back, each word a lie wrapped in love. "I love you more. Sleep well, my Omalika. Tomorrow is our forever." As he sent the message, he made a silent vow. He would marry her, but he would protect her, no matter what it cost him. Later that night, he knelt by his bed, his prayer a desperate mix of confession and pleading. God, I know I've made mistakes, but please don't let her suffer for them. Give me the strength to carry this burden alone. He promised himself and God that he would do everything right from this moment on. He would start treatment immediately. He would never, ever put her at risk. The next morning, the sun rose over Lagos, and Chaik's life began anew. The Church of Our Lady of Fatima in Surulere was a sea of joy, filled with music and laughter. And then he saw her. Adana walked down the aisle in a shimmering white lace gown, her veil catching the light like an angel's wings. Her smile was radiant, her steps graceful and confident. Chaik stood at the altar, looking at her as if she were salvation itself. He managed to smile, but behind it, a storm of love and guilt raged within him. When the priest finally said, "You may now kiss the bride," he hesitated for a split second. He was terrified his lips might betray his secret, that they might somehow taint her. But Adana's eyes, so full of trust and love, pulled him in. He kissed her gently as the church erupted in cheers. The reception hall was a beautiful blur of gold and white. Flavor's music filled the air, guests were dancing, spraying Naira notes, and celebrating their union. Adana's joy was pure, and it was contagious. Chaik danced beside her, a smile fixed on his face, trying to ignore the constant ache in his chest. Every laugh from the crowd felt like a forgiveness he hadn't earned. Every cheer felt like a countdown to a truth he could never tell. When the night finally ended, and they drove away as husband and wife, Chaik held her hand, squeezing it tight. He renewed his silent promise. Whatever happens, I will keep you safe. For the first few months of their marriage, life was sweet, the kind of sweetness Lagos newlyweds dream of before reality starts knocking. They moved into a modest but cozy two-bedroom flat in Bagada, a quiet estate with bougainvillea flowers creeping over the compound gate. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Adana had poured her savings into furnishing it: soft curtains, a small dining set from Katangara, and a second-hand couch she'd fallen in love with on Gigi. Chaik used his work bonus to buy a flat-screen TV, a gas cooker, and a refrigerator. Together, they made it feel like home. Their days were full of laughter and tiny quarrels. In the mornings, Adana woke up early to pack Chaik's lunch: rice, plantain, or sometimes yam porridge. Chaik would stand behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, murmuring, "Oh Malika, your food go make person forget office work." At night, they cooked together. Chaik would fry plantain while Adana stirred the jollof, both of them teasing and joking until they dissolved into laughter. Their love was easy, real, the kind that didn't need perfection, only presence. They went to midweek services at their new church in Anthony Village, always sitting in the same third-row seat. The pastor often said, "Marriage is not heaven on earth, but it can be a taste of it," and Adana would smile, believing that was exactly what they had. Chaik never stopped calling her Omalika. He'd send sweet texts in the middle of the day, "Just thinking of you, my beautiful queen." And whenever he came home late from work, he'd stop by the Malams' stand near their gate to buy her suya, wrapped in old newspaper and still hot from the fire. "I know say my Omalika like well-spiced suya," he'd say, placing the foil in her hands. She would grin. "You know me too well, my husband." Everything seemed perfect. Almost. There was just one thing, one small, strange thing, that didn't fit. Chaik insisted on using condoms. At first, Adana didn't think much of it. They were both responsible adults, after all. Maybe he just wanted them to plan properly. They had talked about waiting a year before starting a family, to settle, save, and adjust to married life. But as the weeks turned into months, it became a quiet ache at the back of her heart. Before the wedding, their intimacy had been different, free, spontaneous, full of passion and trust. But now, each time things became tender, Chaik would pause, reach into the drawer, and tear open a packet. He never explained, and she never pressed, at least not at first. One humid night, after a long day at school, Adana lay against his chest, tracing circles on his skin. "My love," she said softly, "why you day always use condom? We don't marry now, ABI? No be time to start our Pekin matter." Chaik stiffened for just a moment, barely noticeable, but she felt it. Then he chuckled lightly and kissed her forehead. "Oh Malika, relax. We still get time. Make we enjoy ourselves small before we carry family load. You know how Lagos be, money no day easy." Adana laughed, but something about his answer didn't sit right with her. He was sweet, too sweet sometimes. He still helped with chores, paid the bills on time, even sent money to her parents in Ajagunal. When her younger brother, Chikwudi, needed help with jam registration, Chike transferred the money immediately without being asked twice. He was everything a husband should be: kind, generous, and steady. But still, the question lingered in her heart. It came up again one Sunday afternoon after church. They were eating pounded yam and egusi soup, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above them. "Chike, I know be small girl-o," she said, half joking, half serious. "My mate's day born Pekin left and right. Even Sister Blessing way Mary last year don get bell. What'n we day wait for?" Chike's spoon froze midway to his mouth. He forced a smile and said gently, "Adana, no be like that. I just want make sure say we ready. My business day grow, your school work day stress you. Make we plan well." She nodded slowly. His words made sense, logical, practical. But deep down, something felt off. That night, as she watched him sleep, she noticed small things she'd never paid attention to before. How he sometimes woke up in the middle of the night to drink water or take something from the drawer by his bedside. How he'd lock his phone even when she was in the room. Something he'd never done before marriage. When she tried to reach for his phone one morning to silence an alarm, he startled awake, grabbing it from her hand a little too quickly. "Sorry, babe," he said, trying to laugh it off. "Office emails. You know how private clients can be." Adana nodded, but the unease in her stomach grew. She didn't think he was cheating. No, not Chike. Not the man who prayed with her every morning and sent money to her parents without fail. But she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. What could be so important that he couldn't share it with his wife? Every perfect gesture, every sweet word, now seemed to have a shadow behind it. The perfect life they had built started to feel like a beautiful house with a single, locked door. And Adana was becoming more and more determined to find the key. What do you think Chike is hiding? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. In church, when couples testified about new pregnancies, she'd smile and clap, but her heart tightened. At night, when she lay beside him, she wondered what secret lived between them, a shadow she could not name. Legos still buzzed outside their window. Car horns, distant laughter, the constant noise of life moving forward. But inside their small flat, a quiet tension had begun to grow. Adana didn't know it yet, but her husband's love, as deep as it was, carried a silence that could break both their hearts. A year passed. The calendar pages flipped quietly, one after another, and Adana turned 28. At first, she hadn't noticed the pressure. Life in Bagada went on: morning devotion, traffic to Suralere for school, Sunday jollof after church. But with each passing month, the questions began to come. At family gatherings, the aunties were relentless. They didn't mean harm, or so they said, but their words cut deep all the same. "Adana, wouldn't day happen? 1 year don't go, no Pekin." Auntie Rose would say, adjusting her gelly as if tightening her judgment. "You sure say you day try? Or you just day enjoy marriage?" Another would add, with a laugh too sharp to be friendly. Adana forced smiles, laughed when expected, but each comment sank into her like a thorn. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, was gentler but no less persistent. On the phone, her tone always carried that motherly concern that could choke you with love. "My daughter, pray you know say children not gift from God. Make sure say you and Chike Day do the right thing." Adana would smile through the call, her voice light. "Yes, Mama, we day try." But after hanging up, her heart would tighten. Even at the primary school where she taught, whispers trailed behind her like shadows. "Madam Adana, no bell yet." One teacher would ask in the staff room, pretending to sound casual. "Abi she day enjoy marriage too much?" Another would chuckle, tapping her pen on the table. She learned to smile, to laugh it off, but every night, she cried quietly into her pillow. In their community, a woman's worth was still measured by the cry of a baby. It didn't matter that she was educated, respected, or kind. Without a child, people saw her as incomplete, a story without an ending. She noticed how people's eyes lingered on her at weddings, how the women with babies tied to their backs looked at her with pity. Once, while fetching water at the estate's pump, she overheard a neighbor whisper to another, "Maybe nah Dana get problem. That fine husband of hers, he no fit get Pekin? A beg, I no trust these modern women." The words burned. That night, she decided to find out the truth. The next week, She visited a private clinic in Maryland, claiming she needed a routine checkup. She couldn't risk anyone finding out, not even Chike. The nurse was kind, the tests quick. When the results came, the doctor smiled and said, "Madam, your womb is fine. Hormones normal. You're healthy. Just relax and keep trying." Adana walked out of the clinic with a strange mix of relief and dread. If she was fine, then what about Chike? She sat in the bus home, the city blurring past her, hawkers selling gala and coke, horns blaring, Danfo drivers shouting for passengers. Her mind was louder than the noise around her. Why am Day always use condom? Why he no one talk about children? By the time she reached home, her heart was pounding. She didn't want to believe something was wrong with him. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was fear. Maybe, just maybe, he simply wasn't ready. But deep inside, a storm was brewing. One evening, while Chike was in the shower, the sound of running water filled their small flat. Adana sat on the edge of their bed, her eyes on the half-open drawer beside her. Inside, she could see them, the pack of condoms that had become her silent enemy. She stared at them for a long time. She loved Chike. God knew she did. He was still the man who rubbed her feet after long days, who laughed with her at Nollywood movies, who never forgot to call her Omalika. But his refusal to start a family was slowly killing her spirit. She remembered Mama Ngozi's words. A woman must pray, but she must also act. Something inside her broke that night, not in anger, but in desperation. Her eyes fell on her tailoring kit by the wardrobe. She reached for it, her hands trembling as she picked out a tiny sewing pin. She whispered, "God forgive me," then opened the condom pack. One by one, she pierced them, tiny holes, invisible to the eye. Her heart raced with every prick, her breath unsteady. When she was done, she stared at the box, guilt washing over her. "I just want my Pekin," she murmured, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Not small thing I asked for." The weeks that followed felt like a lifetime. Adana poured her heart into caring for Chike, a desperate, unspoken plea in every action. She cooked his favorite meals: pepper soup with fresh goat meat, afang soup rich with periwinkle, starch and bunga, just like her mother used to make. She wore her finest wrappers, her hair neatly plaited, her smile a constant, bright shield. She prayed harder than she ever had before. Midweek vigils, women's prayer meetings, even fasting became her new routine. Every single night, she knelt beside their bed and whispered into the darkness, "Lord, please, let this month not pass me by." Chike noticed her renewed affection. He saw the special meals, the careful way she dressed, the warmth in her eyes. He smiled, completely unaware of the quiet rebellion brewing inside her, the silent deal she was trying to strike with God. She became a detective of her own body, watching for every sign, every symptom. A missed period, a sudden craving, a wave of nausea, anything that might signal a change. But the months passed, one after another, and nothing changed. The disappointment was a familiar, unwelcome guest. Her period returned faithfully each month, a crimson tide that seemed to mock her prayers and her efforts. By the 6th month, Adana was tired. The waiting, the hoping, the constant cycle of anticipation and letdown had become a physical weight on her body and soul. A profound weakness began to settle in her bones. Some mornings, she could barely summon the strength to get out of bed. Her appetite faded, and the vibrant glow of her skin grew pale and dull. She told herself it was just stress, too many lessons to prepare, too little rest at night. Then the coughing started. At first, she dismissed it as a simple irritation from the harmattan dust hanging heavy in the air. But it didn't go away. Instead, it deepened, becoming a dry, painful, relentless hack that echoed in the quiet moments. Chike noticed. "Oh, Malika, you sure say you day okay?" he'd ask, his brow furrowed with concern. "Nah small Qatar," she would reply with a weak smile, waving away his worry. But in her heart, she knew something was wrong. This was something beyond tiredness, something more than stress. She tried to pray it away, tried to pretend she was fine, tried to will her body back to health. But every night, as she lay beside Chike, her chest felt heavy, and her cough echoed in the quiet flat. A cold, sharp fear began to take root in her soul. Something inside her was changing, shifting in a way she couldn't understand. And though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning. The beginning of a truth that would shake the very foundation of everything she thought she knew. The clinic in Acajo wasn't fancy. It was just a modest building tucked between a busy pharmacy and a tailor's shop, with a faded blue sign that read Hope Medical Center. Adana chose it deliberately. It was far from Bogota, far from her school, far from anyone who might recognize her and ask questions she couldn't answer. She had been coughing for weeks now, feeling weaker with each passing day. Her clothes hung loosely on her shrinking frame. Her once radiant skin had lost its glow, and every morning she woke with a dull, persistent ache behind her eyes. She had told Chaik she was visiting a friend from church. He smiled, kissed her forehead, and handed her some transport money. "No stay too long, O Malika," he'd said warmly. "Remember, say you go rest small before dinner." He had no idea where she was really going, no idea of the fear coiling in her stomach. At the clinic, a nurse took her vitals, her temperature, her blood samples. The doctor, a calm, middle-aged man with kind eyes, listened patiently as she described her symptoms. "I think it's malaria," she said, forcing a weak smile. "Or maybe typhoid. The cough just no one stop." He nodded thoughtfully, scribbling notes on her file. "We'll test for malaria, typhoid, and a few other things," he said. Then he paused, his pen hovering over the paper. "Madam, have you considered taking an HIV test?" Adana's eyes widened. A laugh escaped her lips, but it was a nervous, shaky sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Me? HIV? Doctor, no be me you day talk about. My husband and I, we day faithful. We done married 2 years now." The doctor smiled gently, his gaze unwavering. "Madam, it's just routine. Sometimes, symptoms like this can overlap with many different conditions. It's always best to be sure." She hesitated, her mind racing. Then, with a small, reluctant nod, she agreed. "Okay, do it." The test itself took only a few minutes, but the waiting felt like hours. She sat in the small, sterile consulting room, watching the wall clock tick. Each second sounded like a drumbeat, her heart racing faster and faster. When the doctor finally returned, his expression had changed. The kindness was still there, but it was now tinged with a deep, unmistakable sorrow. "Madam Adana," he began softly, pulling his chair closer. "Your malaria and typhoid tests are negative, but your HIV test came back positive." The words didn't make sense at first. It was as if he'd spoken in another language, one she couldn't comprehend. "Sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You say positive?" "No, no, that's not possible." The doctor sighed, a heavy, compassionate sound. "I'm so sorry, madam. We will do a confirmatory test, of course," but she didn't let him finish. The room began to blur at the edges. Her hands trembled uncontrollably in her lap. Her heartbeat roared in her ears, drowning out everything else. "No, no, I'm a married woman. My husband, he's not like that. We day faithful. Doctor, check him again. There must be a mistake." But deep down, in a small, dark corner of her mind, a memory surfaced. The condoms. His hesitation. The secrets she felt but couldn't name. The nights he turned away from her, offering flimsy excuses. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. She left the clinic in a complete daze, clutching the folded paper that now felt like a death sentence. She didn't remember getting into a kiki, didn't remember paying the driver. The world outside the window was a blur of motion and color, but she was frozen, suspended in a silent, terrifying reality. By the time she reached home, her legs felt numb, as if they belonged to someone else. That night, when Chaik returned from work, he turned to her, smiling gently. "Yes, my love." She stood there, her body shaking as she threw the test result at him. It landed on the floor, fluttering like a wounded bird. He bent to pick it up, his brows furrowing as he read the bold letters. HIV positive. He froze. The silence stretched between them like a noose. "Chaik, what is this?" Her voice cracked. "You gave me HIV? Are you cheating on me?" For a moment, he said nothing, just stared at the paper, his lips trembling. Then, his knees gave way. He fell to the floor, tears spilling freely down his face. "Adana, no, I didn't cheat. I swear by God Almighty, I didn't cheat." His voice was raw, desperate. I found out the night before our wedding that I have HIV. I didn't want to give it to you. That's why I've been using protection. I was protecting you." Adana's scream filled the flat. It was loud, piercing, full of 2 years of bottled-up pain and betrayal. Protect me? You lied to me for 2 years. You let me think I was the problem. You let me pierce your condom. Chike. I did it because I wanted a baby, because I wanted people to stop mocking me. And now I have HIV because of you. Her words hit him like physical blows. Chike sobbed, his hands covering his face. He confessed everything. How he found out the night before they were supposed to get married. How he started taking ARVs in secret. How he just couldn't bring himself to tell her, paralyzed by fear, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of shame. He stumbled to his briefcase and opened it, showing her the small bottles, antiretroviral drugs, neatly hidden between old work files. I swear, Adana, I have never touched another woman since we got married. I've been taking my drugs. I've been careful. I couldn't lose you. But his words were like ashes. The damage was already done. Adana stood trembling, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to hit him, to scream, to disappear. You already lost me, she said finally, her voice cold and broken. That night, she packed a small bag and left. She returned to her parents' house in Ajagunal. When her mother, Mama Ngozi, saw her daughter standing at the door, thin and shaking, she knew something was terribly wrong. Adana, my child, what happened? The truth came out in sobs. The test result, the secret, the betrayal. Mama Ngozi wailed, clutching her chest. Her father, Papa Emeka, his voice thundering through the small house, roared, "That boy will see me. After everything I did for him, he gives my daughter this sickness." Her younger brother, Chikwudi, wanted to fight. "Just let me go to Bagada now. I will show him Pepper." But Adana barely heard them. She just sat silently, staring into nothing. The following months were a blur of pain and adjustment. She started ARV treatment at the General Hospital. The nurses were kind, but the drugs took a heavy toll on her body. There was constant nausea, overwhelming fatigue, and endless headaches. She lost weight, and her once glowing skin became dull and dry. At church, they prayed for her, laying hands on her, fasting, and crying out for a miracle. But the whispers never stopped. "That's Adana, the one with HIV. Look how skinny she's gotten. It's such a pity." Neighbors watched her with a toxic mix of fear and pity. The same people who once praised her marriage now crossed the street when they saw her coming. She stopped teaching. She couldn't face her students' curious eyes or her colleagues' hushed gossip. Her world grew smaller and smaller, shrinking to the four walls of her parents' house, the clinic, and her room, where she cried quietly every night. Sometimes, she dreamt of Chike, the man who once called her Omalika, his beautiful one. The man who brought her suya on his way home from work, who danced with her under the stars. She still loved him, and that was the part that hurt the most. Because that love had brought her so much joy, but it had also broken her, piece by piece. And now, as she stared at her reflection in the mirror, thinner, older, sadder, she wondered if she could ever forgive him or herself. For months after Adana left, Chike's life unraveled. The once lively flat in Bagada became a hollow, empty space, filled only with silence and suffocating regret. Her clothes still hung in the wardrobe. Her slippers were still by the door, her perfume faintly lingering in the air. They were all constant, painful reminders of the life he had destroyed with one terrible lie. He tried calling her, sending messages, leaving desperate voice notes that went unheard. But Adana was gone. Her silence was louder and more final than any angry words she could have said. Still, Chike refused to give up. Every Saturday, he drove down to Ajagunal, his car loaded with bags of groceries, rice, beans, gari, sometimes fresh fish or yam. He would knock on the door, wait, and when no one opened, he would leave the bags by the doorstep. At first, Papa Emeka refused to even acknowledge his presence. "If you don't want to see my anger, you better leave," he would shout from inside the house. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a year after she had left, Adana agreed to meet him. They chose a small restaurant in Maryland, a quiet corner spot with soft high-life music playing in the background. She wore a simple Ankara gown and a scarf, nervous but composed. When Chike walked in, her breath caught. He looked thinner, his eyes sunken, his face lined with sleepless nights. But when he saw her, his expression softened with relief and love. He sat down slowly, his hands trembling slightly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, his voice breaking, "Adana, I cannot live without you." I know I hurt you, more than any man should ever hurt the woman he loves. But I will spend my life making it right. He took her hand gently, tears glistening in his eyes. We can still have children, Omalika. With treatment, we can have healthy children. I will do anything. I will go anywhere. Just give me a chance. Adana's lips trembled. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, but the tears came anyway, slow and uncontrollable. Chike, she whispered, you broke me. You lied to me. But I still love you. I don't even know why, but I do. He reached for her hand again, holding it like a lifeline. And for the first time in months, she didn't pull away. They began counseling, both at the hospital and with their pastor, who welcomed them with open arms. Every week, they sat with doctors and counselors, learning about viral loads, adherence, and safe conception. Adana learned that with consistent treatment, Chike's viral load could become undetectable, meaning he couldn't transmit the virus. They both started to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. They prayed together again. They attended couples fellowship, speaking honestly this time, without masks. When Adana finally moved back to Bogota, the neighbors watched in surprise. The whispers started again, but this time, she didn't care. She was walking into her home with her head held high, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Their love grew differently now. It wasn't the fiery rush of early marriage. It was quiet, grounded, honest. There were no more secrets. Chike shared his struggles openly, the bad days, the fears, the doctor visits. Adana shared hers, the pain, the resentment, the exhaustion of rebuilding trust. And slowly, their hearts began to meet again in the middle. Years passed. Their home in Bogota filled again with laughter, music, and light. They both continued their treatment, religiously attending hospital appointments, and learned to live healthy, disciplined lives. Then, one rainy morning, Adana felt a familiar wave of nausea. She didn't dare hope. Not yet. But when the test strip turned positive, she fell to her knees and cried, God, after all, you still remember me. Chike rushed home from work when she called, out of breath, his heart pounding. When she showed him the test result, he froze, then dropped to his knees, hugging her tightly. Oh, Malika, this time, it's a miracle. God has rewritten our story. 9 months later, in a bright hospital ward, Adana gave birth to a baby girl, tiny, beautiful, and full of life. They named her Chioma, meaning good God. The doctor smiled when he brought the test results. Your baby is HIV negative. She's perfectly healthy. Chike broke down in tears, cradling his daughter as if holding the whole world in his arms. Adana watched them, her husband, her child, her miracle, and felt peace wash over her for the first time in years. She forgave Chike, not because the pain had vanished, but because love had proven stronger than fear. Together, they began to speak at churches, schools, and community meetings, sharing their story openly. They talked about HIV testing, safe sex, and the power of truth in marriage. At first, people were shocked. But as they spoke, others began to come forward, quietly, tearfully, saying, You've given us hope. They became advocates, voices of courage in a world that still whispered in fear. And every time Adana took the microphone, she smiled at her husband in the front row and said, Our story isn't perfect, but it is ours, a story of mistakes, mercy, and a love that refused to die. On quiet evenings, when the world slowed and the sunset painted Lagos gold, Chike would sit with Chioma on his lap while Adana cooked in the kitchen. He'd watch her, the same woman he once thought he'd lost forever, and whisper, Thank you, Lord. You gave me a second chance. Adana would smile back from across the room, her heart full. Their marriage bore scars, yes, but it also bore grace. And as laughter echoed through their small home once again, Adana knew the truth she had once doubted so deeply. Even broken love can bloom again, if watered with truth, forgiveness, and faith. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was something rarer, something real. A Nigerian love story of mistakes, redemption, and the kind of love that survives the fire and still shines bright. 15 years later, the city of Lagos had changed. The skyline was taller, the traffic worse. And yet, in their quiet corner of Bogota Phase 2, peace reigned inside a small yellow duplex with a mango tree in front. That home belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Chike and Adana Okafor, now well-known faces in health circles across Lagos State. Their daughter, Chioma, was no longer the tiny miracle baby who once slept in a pink crib by their bedside. She was a confident, brilliant teenager, tall, bright-eyed, and fiercely outspoken like her mother. Her life was a living testimony to the power of modern medicine and unwavering faith. Growing up, her parents had never hidden their story from her. They told her about the sickness, the secrets, and the struggle to rebuild. They taught her that love wasn't about perfection, but about showing up for each other, especially on the hardest days. Chioma absorbed it all. She wasn't ashamed, she was proud. In school debates, she spoke passionately about stigma and public health. She volunteered at clinics on weekends, helping to distribute informational flyers and talking to young people about getting tested. She had her father's gentle spirit and her mother's unshakable resolve. One afternoon, Chioma came home from school with a flyer for a national essay competition. The theme was My Nigerian Hero. While her classmates wrote about famous politicians or historical figures, Chioma knew exactly who she wanted to write about. She spent weeks locked in her room, pouring her heart onto the page. She wrote about a love that was tested by fire, a faith that moved mountains, and a forgiveness that brought new life. She wrote about her parents. On the day the results were announced, the entire family gathered around the computer. As they scrolled down the list of winners, Chioma's name appeared at the very top. First place. Adana let out a cry of joy, while Chaik lifted his daughter into the air, laughing. But it was the judge's comment that brought tears to everyone's eyes. It read, "This essay is more than a story. It is a lesson in humanity. It reminds us that our greatest heroes are often not on pedestals, but right beside us, showing us what it means to love, to forgive, and to live with courage." The award ceremony was a grand affair in Abuja. When Chioma walked onto the stage to receive her prize, she didn't just thank the judges. She looked out into the audience, found her parents' faces, and spoke into the microphone. "My parents taught me that a story doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. They are my hero." By the time their daughter Chioma was 16, she was already a force to be reckoned with. She had spoken at 2 youth conferences and even had an essay on breaking the silence around HIV published in a national newspaper. One morning at breakfast, she looked at her parents and said, "Mummy, Daddy, you probably don't even realize it, but your story completely changed how I see love and courage. You taught me that secrets destroy, but truth is what heals." Adana smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "My daughter," she replied, "we made mistakes, but we turned them into a message. That's what truly matters." Adana's life had come full circle. The shy, heartbroken woman who once hid in shame had transformed into a respected public health advocate. She worked with an NGO called Voice of Hope, traveling to secondary schools all across Nigeria. She taught young women about hygiene, body awareness, and self-respect, lessons she herself had never learned growing up. Her sessions were always packed. Teenagers would listen in awe as she spoke candidly about her own past ignorance, her fears, and the incredible power of knowledge. "Nobody told me what puberty was," she would often say. "Nobody told me how to care for myself, or that love without wisdom can completely break you. But I'm telling you now, learn. Protect yourself. Love with sense." Chaik, too, had found a new purpose. He became a coordinator at a community-based HIV awareness foundation in Ikeja, where he mentored men who had just been diagnosed. Many of them came to him broken, ashamed, or terrified to tell their wives. He shared his story with them, every single painful detail. "Truth no go kill you," he would say in Pidgin during counseling sessions. "Na lie day destroy marriage. If you love your woman, tell her. Don't let fear turn you into a coward." He'd often end with a smile, showing them a framed picture on his desk, a photo of Adana and Chioma laughing under the mango tree. "That's my reason for living right," he would say. "God no discard me." He just pressed reset. Every December, on their wedding anniversary, the Okafors would visit Our Lady of Fatima Church in Surulere, the same church where their journey began. They'd sit quietly in the pews, holding hands, simply thanking God for His grace. Sometimes they'd run into young couples preparing for their weddings, and Adana would smile knowingly. "Marriage sweet," she would tell them, "but truth is the only foundation that lasts. Don't marry with secrets. Build your life together with honesty and forgiveness." By the time Chioma turned 17, the Okafors had become something of local legends. Newspapers wrote articles about them. Churches invited them to speak. NGOs quoted their story as proof that HIV wasn't a death sentence, and that love, when it's honest, could heal even the deepest wounds. In 2038, their work was formally recognized at a grand event in Abuja. They were honored for their outstanding contribution to the fight against HIV stigma and their service to humanity. As they stood on stage, hand in hand, with Chioma beaming beside them, the entire crowd rose to their feet in applause. Adana took the microphone, her voice steady and full of emotion. "Once upon a time," she began, "I was a girl who didn't understand her own body, who let shame silence her. I married a man who loved me but was too afraid to tell me the truth. We both made mistakes, painful ones. But grace found us. And today, we stand here not as victims, but as survivors, as proof that love, when purified by truth, can rise again." The hall erupted in cheers. Chaik's eyes glistened with tears as he whispered to her, "Oh Malika, you still day shine." Adana laughed softly, resting her head on his shoulder. Later that night, back in their home in Bagada, after Chioma had gone to bed, they sat together under the mango tree. The Harmattan breeze carried the faint scent of roasted corn and the sound of distant laughter from their neighbors. Chaik reached for her hand, their wedding rings glinting in the streetlight. "Adana," he said quietly, "thank you for giving me a second chance, for turning my shame into a testimony." She smiled, her eyes full of warmth. "Chaik, now God give both of us a second chance. You see that small girl upstairs," she said, pointing toward Chioma's window. "She is the proof that love can start again." They sat there in a comfortable silence, their hearts full, the night calm and kind around them. The years had taught them so much, that love wasn't just about romance, but about patience, not just about laughter, but about forgiveness, not just about vows, but about the daily choices you make. And though life had certainly scarred them both, it had also crowned them with a profound sense of purpose. When people told their story, it was never about disease or betrayal anymore. It was about faith, truth, and the incredible beauty of starting over. Because in the end, that was the legacy they left behind. Not pain, not shame, but hope. Thanks for watching. Kindly like,